we shall take out that one day. Or wonder if it is say so to do. You know? Someone really, another excuse they could give is someone really should help that man. And somebody needs to go help him. They might pass by, you know. But they must say somebody needs to go help him. If I'm going to serve at the temple, I can't get my clothes bloody. One may say. I don't know first aid. Shall I don't know first aid. I'm only one person. The job is too big. I need help. I've got to get to the temple and perform my service for the Lord. One may say, I'm in a hurry. I've got to get home and see my family. Another one, I can pray for him. That's all. Church people good for that, you know. People tell you them pain and they say, I'm going to pray for you. You know, it's not, we don't even contemplate whether or not God has placed us there so we can help. You know, I'm going to pray for you. He brought it on himself. He should have never been alone on such a dangerous road. But I didn't want to walk, you know. It's a hopeless case. He's not dead anywhere. He never asked for help, one may say. And we could talk about a number of other excuses that the priest and the Levite could give why they didn't stop. See the man have them look over, walk on the other side and gone. Gone about them business. Jesus is saying, who is my neighbor? And when it's a love God and love your neighbor, what does that mean? I want to suggest some thoughts this morning. That Jesus described a successful businessman, the Samaritan. It wasn't any little simple man, and I want us to understand this. The Samaritan wasn't a little simple man who walked down the road. The Samaritan likely traveled that trade route often, because that was a trade route. As evidenced by the fact that it was known at a nearby inn and deemed trustworthy enough by the innkeeper to demand an extension of services on credit. Go and take care of him, and when we come back, you put him on the bill until we come back. Remember me a country, you know. I go and shop. And say, put him on the bill there. You know? Whatever the nature of his business, the Samaritan was successful enough to be able to afford oil and wine for medicinal purposes and lodging at an inn for a complete stranger. He is willing to spend his money on the stranger and his time too. The Samaritan puts his other business on hold to see to the needs of the injured stranger. Notice now, not just a stranger, but a Jewish man. And a Jewish man who would naturally despise a Samaritan. Let's not forget that. I think I talked about it one morning Bible study recently. A Jewish man who would naturally despise a Samaritan because Samaritans and Jews had no dealing. The Jews saw them as strangers, nobodies on the periphery, on the margin, had no care for them. And yet, the one unexpected, there's a heap coals of fire. The hero of the parable spends his money on a stranger without any direct obligation to do so. They are not related by kingship, not related by faith, not related by normal people relationship. The Samaritans and the Jews, I said it already, were often antagonists toward one another. And yet in the mind of Jesus, to love God is to make anyone who needs our help into a neighbor. Jesus emphasizes this point by reversing the thrust of the lawyer's original question. The lawyer asks, who is my neighbor? A question that begins with the self, and then asks who the self is obligated to help. So Jesus reverses the question and asks, which of the three was a neighbor to the man? So you ask, who is my neighbor? Jesus says, which of the three was a neighbor? A question that centers on the man in need and asks who is obligated to help him. If we begin by thinking of the person in need rather than ourselves, does that give us a different perspective on whether God calls us to help? Notice, let me see if I can make this point as clearly as I can. Notice, the man asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And through the telling of the parable, Jesus at the end asked him, which of these is my neighbor? So in other words, when the lawyer asked Jesus, who is my neighbor, he's talking about himself. So he's beginning with self. Who is my neighbor? but the story Jesus tells. And the question Jesus asked of these three who was a neighbor, Jesus turns the question the other direction and points it at the lawyer. Well, points it at the man in need and says, listen man, when you are contemplating the idea about neighbor, it's not about you. It's about turning yourself inside out. It's about looking in the other direction. It's about seeking out for those who need help. So when you ask, who is my neighbor, you have to recognize that deep in that question must be the recognition that the neighbor, the one who is a neighbor, is the one who looks out for those who need help, whomever that person is. Are you with me? So Haddon Robinson says, a neighbor is someone whose needs you have the ability to meet. You must write that down, you know. A neighbor is someone whose needs you have the ability to meet. That's Jesus in this story. Someone whose needs you have the ability to meet. The Samaritan doesn't just help the injured man by throwing him a few coins, you know, take this and go and get your money. Rather, he makes sure all the man's needs are cared for, both his immediate medical needs and his need for a space to recuperate. Sometimes our need is our response to people's needs is so narrow, so base level. You know, let's give my money and make him go on. You know, rather than engaging that person to ask, how can I better help you? It's like, it's not now giving a man a fish, it's teaching a man how to fish. Asking him what's going on with you. Tell me your story. I was saying this on Wednesday gone. You know, sometimes we have to understand that when we are called to help in being a neighbor, it is not just to give somebody something. You understand? And they take this and go on. And they come back too much time and say, nobody come back again. Rather, it is how we engage that person to ask the important questions. How might I help you? What's your story? What's your journey? How can you be helped? How can I teach you how to fish? Are you with me? And when we talk about, and as I said, I have to think about the church and this church. So when we talk about helping people, we have to ask ourselves, is giving a package to a person sufficient? Think about that. Is giving a food package to a person in the community sufficient? Church gone quiet, now I think hard. The Samaritan takes on an extraordinary degree of risk to help the stranger. He risks getting jumped by the same bandits when he swooped down to help the man. He risks being cheated by the innkeeper. He risks being saddled by the expense and emotional weight of caring for someone. But he takes on these risks because he acts as if his own life were the one in question. You get the point? It's like he says to himself, you know, it's like what do we call it again? What do we call this? Do unto others as you have them do. What do we call it again? The golden rule. Do unto others as they will have them do unto you. He sees this man as himself and says to himself, if I were in this situation, how would I want somebody to help? There's not just giving a man something and say, go on. But the innkeeper took on this man as if it were himself he was caring for. The Samaritan thus cares for the man as he might care for his own self. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I want them to get that. Huh? I want them to get that. Although, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So the man, the Samaritan, took on the man's need as if it were himself. In other words, it's to be empathetic. It's to put yourself in the other person's position or shoe And think to yourself, if I were in that position, how would I want to be treated? That's how we truly care for people. Empathetically. Being in the other person's position and shoe. And contemplating, how would I want to be treated? So every time we open our mouth to talk, and every time we go to do something, we must ask ourselves, would I want someone to say that about me? Would I want to be treated that way? If we use it as a guardrail, we would talk less. Sister Donkey, you want to talk? Sister Donkey? Yes, sir? Need. It's not their need. It's not their need. And if we were to inquire about their need, we would have served them better. You know, some people only want you to listen to them. They don't want them to find you. They only want somebody to talk to. That's all. They don't want nothing else but somebody to talk to. To hear their story and care. That's all. And then gone home feeling better. My friend, psychologist friend, won't call him name, always said, "Well, man, you see this job is a fantastic job, you know. You know, sometimes people come into my office, the psychiatrist, you know, come into my office and they say, you know, Doc, this is wrong with me." And he's like, "Oh, tell me what's wrong with you." And sit down and tell them, pour out them heart. And then get up and swallow down and start crying. Doctor said, when you have this, obviously you have tissue of white face. And then the lady cried and got up and hug up the doctor and hug her up and said, "Oh my, I'm sorry about your story," or whatever. And she said, and she paid Dr. money. She said, "Doctor, you're the best doctor ever." And all doctors were listening. Yeah, that's all. She paid her money and she got it. She feels good. Because somebody cared enough to listen. And sometimes, can I tell you, sometimes even people in the medical field, if you're not too careful enough, if you're not too careful enough, you become numb to people. So you see them as a little person you're going to offer medical care to, but beyond that, I just say go. Nothing beyond that. Where's that care for you? Yeah? Yes, the hope she got. Yes. Made a difference. Made a difference. Yes. You know, made a difference. Ministry started, friends. So we might have expected him to be an enemy, but he was a neighbor who showed mercy on him. This is the best example of what it means to be a neighbor, to love your neighbor as yourself. Samaritan was an outsider, failed to meet, Samaritan came after others, failed, came before it was too late, came with everything necessary, came right to the afflicted man, gave tender care, provided for his future needs. I close with this thought. When we receive life-saving mercy, we who have received life-saving mercy must understand that otherness ceases. Seeing and treating a person as the other. That's what I mean. The other. And we experience our common humanity. The lawyer proceeds, and so do we. Who your neighbor is and what it looks like to be a neighbor. So what the lesson is teaching us, as Jesus says, go and do likewise, is that we must not see another as the other. As the other. You and I are human beings, equally created in the image and likeness of God. There is no other. Are you still here? Good. Let's close. Let me ask you to reflect on these three questions for your personal reflection. Is there anyone who is the other in our lives that we perceive as the other? How may the church treat persons like the other? And finally, Jesus said to the lawyer, "Go and do likewise." What is Jesus challenging us to do? And I want to suggest that as Jesus challenges us to go to do, it really begins with our perspective. So before we can even do, we have to think about how do we see the person. That's why I say, how do we see people? So we have to begin with how do we see before we can. Because the way we view people is the way we treat people. Are you still here? The way we view people is the way we treat people. So we have to reflect on our minds. That's it, Jeffrey driving in. We have to reflect on at the mind before we do. So how do we see people? How does the church treat people? And out of that view, out of that perspective, are we going to be challenged to talk about what do we do? Amen? Let's stand. Yes. A lady beg you something? Yes. You gave her what? Oh, and that's not enough. Yes. That's a good starting point, by the way. Yes. That's a good starting point. Yeah. Did you ask her that? Yeah? Oh, man, you missed the opportunity, man. Yes. Definitely.